Have you ever heard the story of Job in the Bible? Well, today I'm going to show you how this story explains Job's journey to loving God unconditionally. What is going on, everyone? We are back for another episode of Prospering with Christ. I hope that you had a wonderful week last week, and I hope that this week will be just as amazing to you as well. So, for today's episode, we are doing part 4 of our Job series where we're discussing Job's journey to loving God unconditionally. And so, in order for you to understand this part, make sure that you have listened to episodes 176, 177, and 178 before listening to this one so that this will make sense to you. We're picking up in the middle of the book of Job. And so you want to make sure that you've already listened to those parts in order to understand what we're talking about today. So we are going to pick up on chapter 25 and we're going to read chapters 25 and 26 together. Then Bildad the Shuhite replied, God is powerful and dreadful. He enforces peace in the heavens. Who is able to count his heavenly army? Doesn't his light shine on all the earth? How can a mortal be innocent before God? Can anyone born of a woman be pure? God is more glorious than the moon. He shines brighter than the stars. In comparison, people are maggots. We mortals are mere worms. Then Job spoke again. How have you helped the powerless? How have you saved the weak? How have you enlightened my stupidity? What wise advice you have offered. Where have you gotten all these wise sayings? Whose spirit speaks through you? The dead tremble, those who live beneath the waters. The underworld is naked in God's presence. The place of destruction is uncovered. God stretches the northern sky over empty space and hangs the earth on nothing. He wraps the rain in his thick clouds, and the clouds don't burst with the weight. He covers the face of the moon, shrouding it with his clouds. He created the horizon when he separated the waters. He set the boundary between day and night. The foundations of heaven tremble. They shudder at his rebuke. By his power the sea grew calm. By his skill he crushed the great sea monster. His spirit made the heavens beautiful, and his power pierced the gliding serpent. These are just the beginning of all that he does, merely a whisper of his power. Who then can comprehend the thunder of his power? So in verse 3, Job says, How you have enlightened my stupidity, what wise advice you have offered. Job's response was basically him being sarcastic. He was basically telling Bildad, I am not stupid, and the things that you are saying to me is not helping because I already know it. The wisdom that you have is the same wisdom that I have. The understanding about God that you have is the same understanding about God that I have. You are not offering me any more insight. You are not offering me any more knowledge. You are not saying anything that is benefiting me in this situation. You are not saying anything that is helping me make it out of this situation. He was basically trying to explain to Bildad, I have the same understanding, the same knowledge, and the same wisdom that you do. So if you want to help me, you have to offer me more than what I already have. And as I was reading this passage, my question that I kept asking about Job is that if Job understands that his friends are not offering him any more insight, if his friends are not benefiting his situation, then why does he keep making the decision to engage in this conversation with them? Why won't he set up boundaries and end the conversation? Why won't he set up boundaries and say, listen, you do not have any insight that's going to help me in this season. So you are not someone that I want to learn from in this season. You are not someone that I want to listen to in this season. Why don't he just set up those boundaries and end the conversation? We are on chapter 26. And God has still yet to come in and speak to Job. God has still yet to come in and bless Job, to give him more understanding on why this is happening, to help him understand what he needs to work on and how he needs to grow in this season, to actually bring him out the season and bless him into more. God has yet to come in and do anything. And the reason why is because Job keeps engaging in a dead conversation. Job's attention is not fully on getting understanding from God. It's not fully on trying to make it out of this season. Job's attention is on trying to prove a point to his friends, trying to get his friends to understand him, trying to help his friends understand why they are wrong. And what he doesn't realize is by him doing this, by him engaging in this conversation with his friends who already feel like they know everything, who already feel like they have all the answers, who already feel like they are above him, he is wasting time. He is distracted. He is blocking God from being able to come through and speak to him. So many of us wonder why God has not been answering us in this season. So many of us have been wondering why we have not seen God coming through for us in this season. And maybe the reason why is because we are too focused on distractions. We're too focused on trying to prove a point to people. We're too focused on trying to get people to understand what God is doing in our life, to get people to understand things from our point of view, from God's point of view. And it's not our responsibility to do that. We have to sometimes create boundaries and tell them, you know what, this conversation is getting us nowhere. You know what, it's clear that you're not going to change your mind, and it's clear that I'm not going to allow you to change my mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dead the conversation here, and I'm going to turn my attention to God. That is what Job should have been doing. But instead, he's getting frustrated because his friends just refuse to see things from his point of view. His friends just refuse to admit that maybe there's another reason, maybe there's another solution. So now we are going to read chapters 27 and 28. Then Job continued speaking. I vow by the living God who has taken away my rights, by the Almighty who has embittered my soul, as long as I live, while I have breath from God, my lips will speak no evil, and my tongue will speak no lies. I will never concede that you are right. I will defend my integrity until I die. I will maintain my innocence without wavering. My conscience is clear for as long as I live. May my enemy be punished like the wicked, my adversary like those who do evil. For what hope do the godless have when God cuts them off and take away their life? Will God listen to their cry when trouble comes upon them? Can they take delight in the Almighty? Can they call to God at any time? I will teach you about God's power. I will not conceal anything concerning the Almighty, but you have seen all this. Yet you say all these useless things to me. This is what the wicked will receive from God. This is their inheritance from the Almighty. They may have many children, but their children will die in war or starve to death. Those who survive will die of a plague, and not even their widows will mourn them. Evil people may have piles of money and may store away mounds of clothing, but the righteous will wear that clothing, and the innocent will divide that money. The wicked builds houses as fragile as a spider's web, as flimsy as a shelter made of branches. The wicked go to bed rich, but wake to find that all their wealth is gone. Terror overwhelms them like a flood, and they are blown away in the storms of the night. The east wind carries them away, and they are gone. It sweeps them away. It whirls down on them without mercy. They struggle to flee from its power, but everyone jeers at them and mocks them. People know where to mine silver and how to refine gold. They know where to dig iron from the earth and how to smelt copper from rock. They know how to shine light in the darkness and explore the farthest regions of the earth as they search in the dark for ore. They sink a mine shaft into the earth, far from where anyone lives. They descend on ropes, swinging back and forth. Food is grown on the earth above, but down below the earth is melted as by fire. Here, the rocks contain precious lapis lazuli, and the dust contains gold. These are treasures no bird of prey can see, no falcon's eyes observe. No wild animal has walked upon these treasures. No lion has ever set his paw there. People know how to tear apart flinty rocks and overturn the roots of mountains. They cut tunnels in the rocks and uncover precious stones. They dam up the trickling streams and bring to light the hidden treasures. But do people know where to find wisdom? Where can they find understanding? No one knows where to find it, for it is not found among the living. It is not here, says the ocean, nor is it here, says the sea. It cannot be bought with gold. It cannot be purchased with silver. It's worth more than all the gold of Ophir, greater than precious onyx or lapis lazuli. Wisdom is more valuable than gold and crystal. It cannot be purchased with jewels mounted in fine gold. Coral and jasper are worthless in trying to get it. The price of wisdom is far above rubies. Precious period from Ethiopia cannot be exchanged for it. It's worth more than the purest gold. But do people know where to find wisdom? Where can they find understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of all humanity. Even the sharp-eyed birds in the sky cannot discover it. Destruction and death say, we've heard only rumors of where wisdom can be found. God alone understands the way to wisdom. He knows where it can be found, for he looks throughout the whole earth and sees everything under the heavens. He decided how hard the wind should blow and how much rain should fall. He made the laws for the rain and laid out a path for the lightning. Then he saw wisdom and evaluated it. He set it in place and examined it thoroughly. And this is what he says to all humanity. The fear of the Lord is true wisdom. To forsake evil is real understanding. I want to go back to chapter 27, verses 5 through 6, where Job said, I will never concede that you are right. I will defend my integrity until I die. I will maintain my innocence without wavering. My conscience is clear for as long as I live. Job knew that he was innocent. So it was so easy for him to stand firm and maintain his faith in his innocence. No matter what his friends said, no matter how many times his friends tries to talk him in to believing that he did something wrong, talk him in to believing that he's evil and he's not a good person, he was going to stand firm in his belief of his innocence because he knew for a fact that he was innocent. He could not recall one time where he did anything wrong. He could not recall one time where he acted in evil ways. He could not recall one time where he disobeyed God. So it was so easy for him to stand firm without wavering, no matter how many times his friends tempted him. And as I was reading this, I started to question, why was it so easy for Job to stand firm on his innocence, but not stand firm in his situation? Why was it so easy for Job to have faith in his innocence, but not have faith that his situation would get better, that God will come through for him, that God cared about him, that God loved him? Why was it so easy for him to stand firm in one area of his life, but not stand firm in this area of his life? And I started to realize the reason why it was so easy for Job to stand firm in his innocence is because he knew for a fact that he was innocent. But he did not know for a fact how God felt about him in this situation. He did not know for a fact how God felt about the situation. He did not know for a fact why this situation happened, what God was trying to do in this circumstance. See, it is so easy for us to stand firm on things that we know as a fact. Doubt only starts to creep in on the things that we are uncertain about, on the things that we cannot prove, on the things that we don't know for sure is going to happen, or we don't know for sure it did happen. Doubt only creeps in on the things that we are uncertain about, on the things that we cannot fact check. And so while we're on this journey with Christ, there's going to be so many things that we're going to have to move on, so many things that we're going to have to believe God for, and we're not going to be certain about it. We're not going to know for a fact what the outcome will be. We're not going to know for a fact that we'll reach that promise, that we'll reach that breakthrough. We're not going to know for a fact that God will come through. We're not going to know for a fact how many storms we're going to go through and how many we're going to make it out of. We're not going to know things for a fact. And if we make the decision to focus only on the parts that we're uncertain about, which is the outcome, we're going to constantly run into doubt. We're going to constantly talk ourselves out of things. We're going to constantly feel fear. We're going to constantly not trust God. We're going to constantly want to stay here and not move on those things. And if we really want to see this thing through with God, if we really want to see God's promises come to pass in our life, we're going to have to do something that's very difficult. We are going to have to turn our uncertainties into facts. And you may be wondering, like, how am I supposed to do that? Because I can never be 100% certain of what the outcome is going to be. Number one, there is a way for you to make yourself more certain of your outcome than you are now. And I'm going to speak on that in a moment. But the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to stop focusing on being certain of the outcome and start focusing on being certain of God. Let's go back to the story of Job for a minute. Throughout this entire series, I have been pointing out to you how Job does not truly understand who God is. Job has been taught up to fear God. Job has been taught up to do what God says or he will punish you. And what Job was taught has limited his understanding of who God is. What Job was taught put this false perception up of who God is, where he views God as an enemy, where he views God as unloving. And the way that Job has been talking throughout this entire situation, throughout this entire circumstance, has been based on that false perception that he has been taught his entire life. There is no reason for Job to be confident in God when he does not view God as loving. There is no reason for Job to be confident in God when he does not view God as a waymaker. There is no reason for Job to be confident in God when he does not view God as a comforter. There is no reason for Job to be confident that he's going to make it out to the other side when he cannot understand why God even put him in this predicament. Job's understanding of God is the reason why he is feeling hopeless, is the reason why he is complaining, is the reason why he is feeling worthless. If Job understood who God is, if Job truly understood how God operated, it would be so much easier for him to stand firm in this season and believe that he's going to make it out to the other side. We wouldn't have to worry about Job wavering, because every time that doubt creeps in, Job will be able to counter back with the fact. And the same thing applies to you. Some of you have been on your journey with God. Some of you are in down seasons. Some of you are experiencing failures. Some of you are confused. Some of you are tired. And you have been struggling with so many doubts, so many thoughts that's telling you to give up, so many thoughts that's telling you that it's never going to work, that you're hopeless, that you're worthless, that God doesn't love you, that God is not going to come through for you. And you've been giving into those thoughts. And the reason why you've been giving into those thoughts is because you do not truly understand who God is. If you understood how powerful God is, if you understood God's mentality, how loving he is, how caring he is, how he wants to grow you, how he wants you to do better, how he wants you to be better, if you understood who God is and what God is doing in this season, it would be so much easier for you to stand firm without wavering in the situations and the circumstances that he has you in this current season. The next thing that stood out to me was chapter 28, and I don't want to read it because it was half of this chapter. But Job went on a whole insight and wisdom rant of wisdom. He said that wisdom is something that we cannot find. Wisdom is something that cannot be purchased. Wisdom is worth more than gold and ophir and all these different things like rubies. And at the end, he asked, but where do people find wisdom? Where can they find understanding? It's hidden from the eyes of all humanity. We've only heard rumors of where wisdom can be found, but we do not find wisdom. So, as I was reading this, I decided to Google what the definition of wisdom is. Wisdom means the ability to apply truth in a given situation for godly ends. This definition goes along with a previous episode that I did where I explained the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is gaining new information, but wisdom is actually taking that information and applying it to actually see a result. The point that I want to make is that in chapter 28, Job talked about how difficult it is to gain wisdom. And there are so many people on this earth who need wisdom to move on their walk with God. They need wisdom to see success in their life. They need wisdom to get these doors open that they're trying to reach. They need wisdom to get to their breakthrough. But many of us don't have wisdom. And the reason why is because they do not understand how to properly seek it. And we can clearly see this with Job's friends. Reading this book, you can clearly see that Job's friends have knowledge, but they do not have wisdom. Throughout this book, they've been talking about the information that they get, the dreams that they have, what they know, what their wise counsel tells them. But you can tell that they do not have wisdom because they never actually applied that knowledge. They never actually experienced that knowledge. They never actually put that knowledge to use to see a result. Because if they did, then they would be able to see that the outcome from that situation, the outcome from the wisdom that they have is completely different from the outcome that Job is experiencing. See, when you actually apply the information that you are given, you learn more through the experience. The next thing that I want to talk about is verse 28, where Job said, "The fear of the Lord is true wisdom. To forsake evil is real understanding." For those of you who don't understand where to get wisdom, it's like you know that you need wisdom. You know that you need more than just information. You need a mapped out plan of how to actually apply this and see a result. Job is telling you how to get wisdom. He's telling you that wisdom comes from the fear of the Lord. See, many of us think that wisdom comes from approaching God, from going to God in prayer and asking him, hey, what do I do next? And in some situations, yes, God will answer you. But when you actually honor and respect God, you will find yourself gaining wisdom. That's where true wisdom is going to come from. How do you honor and respect God? You honor him by building a relationship with him. You honor him by actually seeking him. You try to get his input in everything. It's not just about when you want a blessing. You don't just ask him about your desires. You ask him about everything. You open conversations with him in every areas of your life. You don't just talk to him when things are bad. You don't just talk to him when things aren't going good. You don't just talk to him when you want something from him. You talk to him at all times. You find enjoyment in conversation with God. You talk to him about any and everything. You talk to him on your way to work. You talk to him while you're getting dressed. You talk to him about your hair. You talk to him about your skincare. You conversate with him as if you would conversate with a friend. When you actually get information, you don't just take it and run with it. You take it back to God so that he can give you wisdom on how to apply it. where you're not just on information overload. You just feel like I'm learning so many different things and I don't know how to put the pieces together. I don't know how to take one step. I don't know how to put all this together and make it make sense. I don't know how to use this to move. You take that information back to God so that He can teach you how to turn it into wisdom. Wisdom is something that can only come from God. So in the moments where you need understanding, don't run away from God. Don't just run to coaches and books and your pastor and counselors and therapists. Run to God. If you do run to those people or you run to those things and you're getting some information, maybe you still feel confused. Maybe you still don't understand all the way. Take the information back to God and ask Him, give me revelation over this. Give me insight over this. Teach me the parts that you want me to use and show me the areas that you want me to throw away. And some people are going to listen to this and they're going to say, well, I already do this. I go to God all the time. I pray to God. Whenever I have problems, whenever I need help, I pray to God. But if you're the type of person where maybe you already have a relationship with God, maybe you already seek God over your desires and over your problems, I want you to pay attention to how you approach God. Pay attention to the things that you say when you're speaking to God. Because for a lot of us, we'll say things like, if I need a bill paid, God, send me some money, or God, pay my bill. If we are tired of being single and we want a man, we'll say things like, God, send me my husband. We have a tendency of going to God about the problem. But when's the last time that we stopped and we asked God for wisdom over the problem? Where we don't just say, God, take this problem away, or God, send me something better, but we say, God, give me the wisdom on how to get to that better. Give me the wisdom to understand what you're doing in this season so that I can grow as a person and stand better in that situation. Don't just say, God, send me some money. God, give me the wisdom on how to get the money. God, give me wisdom on why you are allowing me to be broke right now. Verses 16 through 19 says that wisdom is more valuable than anything. So why is it that we only go to God about the thing, but we never go to God about the wisdom? Why is it that we only approach God about the material things, but we never approach Him about wisdom? Why is it that we always go to God and we ask Him to be the one to take it away? We ask Him to be the one to bring us out. We ask Him to do all the work while we just sit here and stand by faith, when we should be asking Him for wisdom so that we can partner with Him and He can give us understanding to grow us and help us maneuver out of the situation and maneuver into something better. But now we're going to go ahead and read chapters 29 and 30. Job continued speaking. I long for the years gone by when God took care of me, when He lit up the way before me and I walked safely through the darkness. When I was in my prime, God's friendship was felt in my home. The Almighty was still with me and my children were around me. My steps were awash in cream, and the rocks gushed olive oil for me. Those were the days when I went to the city gate and took my place among the honored leaders. The young stepped aside when they saw me, and even the aged rose in respect at my coming. The princes stood in silence and put their hands over their mouths. The highest officials of the city stood quietly, holding their tongues in respect. All who heard me praised me. All who saw me spoke well of me. For I assisted the poor in their need and the orphans who required help. I helped those without hope, and they blessed me. And I caused the widows' hearts to sing for joy. Everything I did was honest. Righteousness covered me like a robe, and I wore justice like a turban. I served as eyes for the blind and feet for the lame. I was a father to the poor and assisted strangers who needed help. I broke the jaws of godless oppressors and plucked their victims from their teeth. I thought, surely I will die surrounded by my family after a long, good life. For I am like a tree whose roots reach the water, whose branches are refreshed with the dew. New honors are constantly bestowed on me, and my strength is continually renewed. Everyone listened to my advice. They were silent as they waited for me to speak. And after I spoke, they had nothing to add, for my counsel satisfied them. They longed for me to speak as people long for rain. They drank my words like a refreshing spring rain. When they were discouraged, I smiled at them. My look of approval was precious to them. Like a chief, I told them what to do. I lived like a king among his troops and comforted those who mourned. But now I am mocked by people younger than I, by young men whose fathers are not worthy to run with my sheepdogs. A lot of good they are to me, those worn out wretches. They are gaunt from poverty and hunger. They claw the dry ground in desolate wastelands. They pluck wild greens from among the bushes and eat from the roots of broom trees. They are driven from human society, and people shout at them as if they are thieves. So now they live in frightening ravens in caves and among the rocks. They sound like animals howling among the bushes, huddled together beneath the nettles. They are nameless fools, outcasts from society. And now they mock me with vulgar songs. They taunt me. They despise me and won't come near me, except to spit in my face. For God has cut my bowstring. He has humbled me, so they have thrown off all restraint. These outcasts oppose me to my face. They send me sprawling and lay traps in my path. They block my road and do everything they can to destroy me. They know I have no one to help me. They come at me from all directions. They jump on me when I am down. I live in terror now. My honor has blown away in the wind, and my prosperity has vanished like a cloud. And now my life seeps away. Depression haunts my days. At night, my bones are filled with pain, which gnaws at me relentlessly. With a strong hand, God grabs my shirt. He grips me by the collar of my coat. He has thrown me into the mud. I'm nothing more than dust and ashes. I cry to you, O God, but you don't answer. I stand before you, but you don't even look. You have become cruel towards me. You use your power to persecute me. You throw me into the whirlwind and destroy me in the storm. And I know you are sending me to my death, the destination of all who live. Surely no one would turn against the needy when they cry for help in their trouble. Did I not weep for those in trouble? Was I not deeply grieved for the needy? So I looked for good, but evil came instead. I waited for the light, but darkness fell. My heart is troubled and restless. Days of suffering torment me. I walk in gloom without sunlight. I stand in the public square and cry for help. Instead, I am considered a brother of jackals and a companion to owls. My skin has turned dark and my bones burn with fever. My heart plays sad music and my flute accompanies those who weep. Chapter 29 was very powerful to me because it was basically Job reminiscing on the good times. He was reminiscing on the times where God always came through for him. He was reminiscing on the times where life felt good for him. He was reminiscing on the times where people honored and respected him. He was just spending this entire chapter reminiscing on how life used to be. And this made me realize something really important. In the Christian community, we always talk about when we go from a bad season to a good season. We always talk about the times where God brings us out of suffering. We always talk about the times where God takes us from suffering to abundance, from suffering to better. But what about the times where we go from a good season to a bad season? What about the times where we go from transitioning to life looking good for us to life kind of sucking for us? What about the times where God allows us to enter the storm? What about the times where God allows us to enter the wilderness? We never discuss going from good to bad. And because of that, we never discuss the grieving that we feel when we go from those seasons, when we transition from a better life to a worse life. I have experienced so many times going from a season of good back to a season of bad. And looking back on those good moments, looking back at how I felt when I was in that previous season, looking back at the things that I had when I was in that previous season, I always felt sad. I always felt bitterness. I always felt like I wanted to cry. I always struggled with these thoughts of feeling like I'm going backwards. I worked so hard to get here, and now my situation is just worse than where I started. Now it feels like everything is being stripped away from me. And I feel like because we never talk about the transition of good to bad, and we only talk about the transition of bad to good, I didn't really have anything to reference to help me comfort in those seasons. I didn't know how to feel in those seasons. I didn't know how to make it out of those seasons because nobody ever talks about going from good to bad. They always talk about going from bad to good. What about people who lose things that can never be brought back, like other people? Like maybe you lost a grandparent, maybe you lost a parent, maybe you lost a child. And you look back in that good season when you had them. You look back at that good season where y'all were loving on each other, when they were still here, when you can talk to them, when you can make experiences with them. And now when you look back at it, all it feels like is a memory. You went from a season of good to a season of bad, and you don't know how to grieve here. All you can do is look back and just be sad. All you can do is look back and just cry because you don't know how to make it through. You don't know how to feel good after experiencing such a loss. A lot of us like to follow the doctrine that God is good, and He is. But the problem is we only like to teach things that makes it look like God is good, where we can physically see that God is good. And talking about God taking us from a bad situation to a good situation is us seeing that God is good. But if we were teaching God taking us from a good situation to a bad, a lot of people wouldn't look at that as God is good. And I feel like so many of us, we have to get out of this mentality of only teaching on things that look good, only teaching on things that sound good. Yes, God can take you from bad to good, but sometimes I know it sucks to hear. I know it doesn't sound pretty. I know it doesn't look like God would be good if He did this to you. But sometimes God is going to take you from a good situation to a bad situation. The next thing that stood out to me was in chapter 30, verse 16. Job said, "And now my life seeps away. Depression haunts my days." When you experience going from a good season to a bad season, it's very easy to fall into depression. Not only do you have to deal with being hurt about your circumstance, but now you're hurt because you remember where you were before you came here. Now you're hurt because you feel like you don't deserve to be here. Or for some of us, maybe we are hurt by regrets that we have. Well, maybe if I would have just did this differently, this situation wouldn't have happened. Maybe if I would have learned this a long time ago, this situation wouldn't have happened. I want to give you a real life example of this. I went through good seasons to bad seasons and a lot of different things. And one thing that I experienced that in was my finances. I went through a very big up season financially. And after that experience, I lost everything. I lost everything because I was not financially literate at all. I did not know anything about budgeting, saving, credit, none of these things, right? After I lost everything and I was praying to God over it, God took me through a season of wisdom. He opened doors for me to learn financial literacy. He opened doors for me to be able to buy financial books so that I can start learning these things. And on one hand, I was really happy because I felt like, okay, the next time that I get a financial breakthrough, I'm going to be well prepared to be able to manage my money, grow my money, all this stuff, right? But on the other hand, I had a lot of regret because I couldn't shake the feeling of feeling like, if only I knew this when I had all that money. If only I did this when I had all that money, I wouldn't be in this season. I was so hurt by the regrets that I had. Regrets of not knowing things that I felt I should have known. Regrets of not knowing things and looking back on how I handled the money and feeling like, girl, you was dumb. You were stupid. So, on top of you being hurt by your circumstance, sometimes you're hurt by the regret. Sometimes you're hurt by looking back at the person you used to be when you had that thing, when you were in that blessing, and feeling like you're not that person anymore. There's so much grieving that comes from going from a good season back to a bad. And if you are experiencing a season of grieving, or maybe somebody you know is experiencing that season of grieving, do not make the mistake of feeling bad. Do not make the mistake of feeling like there is something wrong with you feeling sad. There is something wrong with you having regrets. Because, to me, I feel like regrets is a sign that you are growing. Regrets is a sign that you are doing better. And I don't want you to make the mistake of thinking that grieving is wrong. It reminds me of when the election happened and Donald Trump was announced to be the winner. And there were so many people who were crying. There were so many people who were hurt. And then there were so many Christian people saying, like, why are you crying? God is good. God is on the throne. If you believe in God, you should not be feeling how you're feeling right now. And I just want you to understand it is okay to grieve. That's like telling somebody who lost, say, a parent, a child, a family member, whatever. They just lost somebody to death, and you tell them, why are you crying? God is good. It's dismissive. We have emotions for a reason, and it is completely okay for us to grieve those emotions. And I want you to understand that grieving is not just about losing a person. You can grieve any type of loss. So do not feel bad. Do not ever feel bad for being sad about reminiscing on a previous version of you or something you had in the past. But now we are going to go ahead and we are going to read chapters 31 and 32. Job's final protest of innocence. I made a covenant with my eyes not to look with lust at a young woman. For what has God above chosen for us? What is our inheritance from the Almighty on high? Isn't it calamity for the wicked and misfortune for those who do evil? Doesn't he see everything I do and every step I take? Have I lied to anyone or deceived anyone? Let God weigh me on the scales of justice, for he knows my integrity. If I have strayed from his pathway, or if my heart has lusted for what my eyes have seen, or if I am guilty of any other sin, then let someone else eat the crops I have planted. Let all that I have planted be uprooted. If my heart have been seduced by a woman, or if I have lusted for my neighbor's wife, then let my wife serve another man. Let other men sleep with her. For lust is a shameful sin, a crime that should be punished. It is a fire that burns all the way to hell. It will wipe out everything I own. If I have been unfair to my male or female servants when they brought their complaints to me, how could I face God? What could I say when he questioned me? For God created both me and my servants. He created us both in the womb. Have I refused to help the poor or crushed the hopes of widows? Have I been stingy with my food and refused to share it with orphans? No, from childhood I have cared for orphans like a father, and all my life I have cared for widows. Whenever I saw the homeless without clothes and the needy with nothing to wear, did they not praise me for providing wool clothing to keep them warm? If I raise my hand against an orphan, knowing the judges would take my side, then let my shoulder be wrenched out of place. Let my arm be torn from its socket. That would be better than facing God's judgment. For if the majesty of God opposes me, what hope is there? Have I put my trust in money or felt secure because of my gold? Have I gloated about my wealth and all that I own? Have I looked at the sun shining in the skies or the moon walking down its silver pathway and been secretly enticed in my heart to throw kisses at them in worship? If so, I should be punished by the judges, for it would mean I had denied the God of heaven. Have I ever rejoiced when disaster struck my enemies, or become excited when harm came their way? No, I have never sinned by cursing anyone or by asking for revenge. My servants have never said, He let others go hungry. I have never turned away a stranger, but have opened my doors to everyone. Have I tried to hide my sins like other people do, concealing my guilt in my heart? Have I feared the crowd or the contempt of the masses, so that I kept quiet and stayed indoors? If only someone would listen to me. Look, I will sign my name to my defense. Let the Almighty answer me. Let my accuser write out the charges against me. I will face the accusation proudly. I will wear it like a crown, for I would tell him exactly what I have done. I will come before him like a prince. If my land accuses me and all its furrows cry out together, or if I have stolen its crops or murdered its owners, then let thistles grow on that land instead of wheat, and weeds instead of barley. Job's three friends refused to reply further to him because he kept insisting on his innocence. Then Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite of the clan of Ram, became angry. He was angry because Job refused to admit that he had sinned and that God was right in punishing him. He was also angry with Job's three friends, for they made God appear to be wronged by their inability to answer Job's arguments. Elihu had waited for the others to speak to Job because they were older than he. But when he saw that they had no further reply, he spoke out angrily. Elihu, son of Barachel the Buzite, said, I am young and you are old, so I held back from telling you what I think. I thought those who are older should speak, for wisdom comes with age. But there is a spirit within people, and the breath of the Almighty within them, that makes them intelligent. Sometimes the elders are not wise. Sometimes the aged do not understand justice. So listen to me and let me tell you what I think. I have waited all this time, listening very carefully to your arguments, listening to you grope for words. I have listened, but not one of you has refuted Job or answered his arguments. And don't tell me he is too wise for us. Only God can convince him. If Job had been arguing with me, I would not answer with your kind of logic. You sit there baffled with nothing more to say. Should I continue to wait now that you are silent? Must I also remain silent? No, I will say my piece. I will speak my mind, for I am full of pent up words, and the spirit within me urges me on. I am like a cask of wine without a vent, like a new wineskin ready to burst. I must speak to find relief, so let me give my answers. I won't play favorites or try to flatter anyone, for I tried flattery. My creator would soon destroy me. I'm not going to lie. From chapter 32 all the way to the end of the book, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, especially on Elihu, because there are so many people who feel like Elihu was sent by God and Elihu was in the right. Like Elihu opened the door for God to speak, and Elihu was right in the things that he was saying. But as I was studying this, God showed me an interesting perspective of Elihu, and we're going to get into it more in, part 5 that's coming out next week. But from my understanding of what God said to me, Elihu is a representation of what us Christians are in the Christian community. And so, as we read his responses to Job, there's going to be some things that he says that are questionable, and there's going to be some things that he says that are right. And once we read it, I'm going to break down everything that's right and everything that's questionable and explain to you why some things are questionable. But before we get into Elihu, I want to get into Job's friends for the very last time. In in chapter 32, verse 1, it says, Job's three friends refused to reply further to him because he kept insisting on his innocence. What this showed me is that Job's friends were not even listening to him because they already had their mind made up of what he did and who he was. They were not open to hearing his side. They were not open to understanding him. They were not open to hearing him out. And it's so interesting to me because, in my opinion, Job's friends are judgmental. And even in this, generation, like this society, we have a lot of people who are judgmental. But if you look up the definition of what a judge is, the definition of a judge is a ruler, meaning you make a decision on the matter. Now, God breaks down in the Bible how to properly rule as a judge, but I don't feel like pulling that up. So I want you to think about a judge in the court of law. A judge in the court of law has to hear both arguments from the defendant and from the plaintiff. A judge in the court of law has to review all of the evidence. Even if the judge does not like a certain party, even if the judge does not agree with a certain party, that judge still has to review both sides, still has to analyze both sides before they can make a decision. And so many judgmental people is like, we don't want to judge, but we want to be judgmental. We don't want to hear people out. We don't want to listen to understand. We don't want to try to see where they're coming from. We don't want to review their evidence. We want to put up blinders and say, what you're saying doesn't matter. I'm only going to go with what this side is saying. And that's not how you properly judge. Being judgmental is viewed as a bad thing, especially in this society. But that's because a lot of us do it wrong. Like I said, we only hear one side. We already have our mind made up. In all actuality, we act like Job's friends. Our side is right. We don't care what you're saying. If what you're saying is not matching up to what I believe, I don't want to hear it. I'm going to shun you. I'm going to dismiss you. I don't care what you have to say. That's how a lot of people judge. But the way that we should be judging is the way that Elihu judged. Now, like I said, there are some things that Elihu says that are incorrect. But one thing that I do respect about him is that he apparently was listening to this entire conversation. He heard Job's arguments. He heard Job's friends' arguments. He listened to both sides before he made the decision to respond, before he made the decision to judge. That is the proper way that we are supposed to judge situations. But I do want to point out something that Elihu did in this chapter that I don't agree with. In verses 2-3, it says that he was angry because Job refused to admit that he had sinned and that God was right in punishing him. He was also angry because Job's 3 friends made it appear that God was wrong in their inability to answer Job's arguments. The problem with Elihu and even with Job's friends is that they feel the need to speak for God and defend him. Because a lot of us have been taught to fear God. A lot of us have been taught to never question God. A lot of us have been taught that everything that God does is for our good. So when somebody is in a situation that they don't understand and it does not feel good and they can't see God, they don't have clarity on why it's happening, they don't see a way out, and we don't have the answers either because we're just as confused as they are. When they start saying things that does not align with what we were taught, we feel this need to defend God. We feel this need to back up God or defend him on our behalf to make ourselves feel better because we don't want people out here feeling this way. We don't want people out here questioning God. We don't want people out here feeling like God isn't good. So we feel the urge to step up and say something. And sometimes that causes us to speak out of turn, where maybe we're saying things that does not align with what God is doing. There's so many people who feel like Elihu was right. But if you look at the chapter, Elihu stood with Job's friends in believing that God was punishing Job, which was not right. He wanted to defend that argument because that made sense. See, if that wasn't what was happening, they don't understand just as much as Job doesn't understand. So they're pushing this narrative so that they can have a fact to stand on and back up God and defend God and make Job feel bad for the things that he's saying and what he's feeling inside. And it's not necessary. We have to understand that God does not need us to defend him. God understands more than us. God is more powerful than us. And God can deal with people in his own time, in his own way. He can give them understanding in his own time and in his own way. He does not need us to speak on his behalf. He does not need us to defend him on his behalf. And I'm not saying that you can never speak to people about God, but what I am saying is in those moments where you don't understand and somebody's saying things that seems questionable to you, you don't always have to stand up and say something. Sometimes it's okay to be quiet. Sometimes it's okay for you to go to God for understanding, because when it comes to Elihu, when it comes to Job's friends, how many of them actually went to God and asked, "What are you doing about Job's situation? Give me understanding so that I can help him understand more." None of them did that. What they did is they took their knowledge in their brain based off what they were taught, and they projected it onto Job, and they projected it onto his situation. And in that way, Elihu is just as wrong as Job's friends. But we are going to go ahead and stop here for the day. I do have an action step based on everything that we have learned in this episode. So my action step for you this week is, if you are in a bad season, take some time with God. Think back to the good seasons you came out of and take some time to grieve. Feel the sadness, cry, vent to God about how you are feeling, and give it to him. Because once you release those emotions, then you are able to move forward. But that is all that I have for you today. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you subscribe so that you get a notification every time a new episode is released. Also, leave a review and let me and others know how you enjoyed the show. And if you want to stay connected, follow me on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Prospering with Christ. But that's all I have for you today, and I will see you next week.